Welcome to the Therapist Burnout Podcast, episode 107. Hey, therapist. Today I am talking with you about this question. I build guardrails into my life to prevent burnout. I think in making this podcast, I have rejected the notion that there is a way that therapists can prevent burnout. I think that's for a couple of reasons. So, number one, I really sit with a lot of the times thinking the work burns us. So, just we know that trauma exposure and our own trauma history, so toxic stress, will create conditions where we experience burnout, compassion fatigue, or vicarious traumatization. So, that just is happening. That's something that does happen to therapists, regardless of any of our best intentions to stop our burnout. And I think that we see trainings around burnout prevention and compassion fatigue focus so much on what the therapist can do. And I think there's things that the therapist can do. I just don't want, I want to empower you if you want some tools, you want to do some things for yourself. And I think the literature does tell us that mindfulness based strategies, so doing things that incorporate our body, that use breath work, that do the things that we already know how to do, but we struggle to access, are helpful to us. So I think the greater zoom out is, I think a lot of therapists, our temperament tends to be that we take on things until we break. So the research is pretty clear that we don't often see burnout warning signs until it's way too late, until, like, I have told this story so many times, but I know it's helpful to you to hear that I experienced severe mental health symptoms. And looking back at it now, I think a lot of that was the amplification of the pandemic, of being a pandemic therapist, of also going through my menopause transition at a very early age in my 30s. So all of that combined, having young children, I mean, it was just like a perfect storm for me to develop something. If something was going to happen, it was going to happen in 2020 and 2021. And for a lot of us, that was the case. But I think the 2020s are still 2020ing. It's not letting up. And a lot of us are still experiencing a great deal of stress managing our role as a therapist. So I'm including myself in the group. For a while, I was saying on this podcast that I'm no longer a therapist. I actually have a couple therapy clients again, and I think I'm holding tight. I said it was one client, and then another client has come on, and I'm back into doing some EMDR work. And I've been thinking about it for a while of doing some EMDR work again, and it feels good. I think a couple clients feel good to me, and I really sat with that for a while. So that's been a decision I took on in the early fall and then has continued. I think a lot of us have the very best intentions. So when I started this school year, rather, I'll back up. So when I started the school year in August, I had my work life set up in a way where I thought I had some pretty good guardrails on my time, that I was going to be podcasting a certain amount of time, working on my course, which still isn't out there, which I'm launching very soon. And it's not going to be a launchy launch where I'm like doing webinars and stuff. I'm just going to quietly offer it and see if people need the information, and potentially offer more support and maybe workshops. I don't know, something. I'm going to figure it out. But anyway, so I thought I had some good guardrails in place, and I made a decision in my work life that really impacted a lot of things in my personal life and my ability to show up in this podcast, to do more like client facing work with this podcast. So I've been doing consulting for a while, and my consulting work was very limited given that my situation was the way it was. And honestly, in one of these environments, I'm being careful with what I say, because we know there's like things and systems and people that we just can't talk about, right? So I will just say that I've been in some situations in certain environments where there isn't a lot of healthy communication, feedback loops, work relationships just aren't very healthy. And it's taken a lot of my bandwidth. I talked about this in my newsletter in more detail. If you want all the juicy bits, subscribe to Leaving the Chair, a newsletter for therapists. because you get all the juicy bits about what it's like to leave the chair of overwhelm, over functioning, and sometimes the therapy chair. That's the hashtag. Leaving over functioning. So I talked a little bit about this and I wanted to expand in other ways that I can talk about on the podcast because it brought up something for me that I can talk about, which happened a long time ago. And none of these people really know me anymore anyway, or follow this podcast. Maybe I don't. Maybe they're secretly listening to this podcast and they're like, she's talking about me. Who knows? But anyway, I wrote this email to you guys and said, I almost did not become a psychologist. So it was one of my early career stories. And when I was an internship, so I think early in our training, we're taught to override what we know we shouldn't do. We're asked to do things that don't feel good, that feel really inappropriate. I think one of my distinct memories of that was not that predoctoral internship, was going all the way back to my work as a caseworker, and where I had to sometimes take kids out of homes. And I felt complicit in their trauma. I felt absolutely horrible for some of the things that I was asked to do. And so it's things like that. I think things I've talked about on my podcast about being told that I could not go to my dad's retirement party when I was working that casework job. But anyway, going back to this situation where I was asked to do things that were not appropriate. And I think in this particular situation, I was not treated appropriately. I was very vulnerable as a intern. I worked for less than minimum wage at the time. And so I needed that predoctoral internship to get my doctoral degree. So they had a lot of leverage over me and power over me. And they used that in an inappropriate way. That wasn't from a direct supervisor, but that was from someone in that organization. And I think it brought up that back to me because this year I've been consulting in an environment where I'm seeing kind of things done. I think it just had me zoom out, from a bird's eye perspective of our field and just think of how many times we're asked to do things like that. How many times we're asked to do things in our bodies we know it isn't right, that we shouldn't do things in this way, that we're being asked to do things that are inappropriate or not being treated appropriately, but still we stay in the situation. And still we feel like we put a boundary up or we put a guardrail up to say, hey, I can't do this, or I'm uncomfortable with something like this, or I need to be off at a certain time, whatever it may be. And those guardrails that we try to put in place are not honored. I think me now is in a different position in my career where I do have a license, where I do have more opportunities. If I could tell somebody, like, I don't need this job, I'll find something else to do. I can do that. I feel comfortable doing that. But at the time when I was a trainee, I didn't feel like I had that freedom. I didn't feel like I had that flexibility to get that predoctoral internship, to set my life back another year. And I did. I mean, I could have done that. I could have, piecemealed some supervision and not had the experience that would have been an easy end to that goal to get to my doctoral degree. But I think a lot of us can feel that trapped feeling in either the licensure process where maybe we have to feel like we need to take it on the chin and get through the year, get through the experience so that we can cross the finish line of licensure or whatever it is. And so I think zooming out and thinking of like, number one, I would talk to myself then, which maybe this is you now. I don't know. Maybe this is you in your training and your early career and you're trying to figure this out. You're being asked to do an impossible job, maybe see too many clients, or you are being asked to do things that you don't feel are appropriate. I would encourage you to push back because a lot of us who go into this field, we believe that I need to kind of do what I'm told. I need to toe the line, so to speak, so I'm not the squeaky wheel, because most of us are collaborators. Most of us go into this because we want to work with other people. And it's not, I think, a lot of our temperaments to kind of go against the system. So I think that can be tricky just from like a temperament perspective that we don't want to do that. I felt that super strongly, by the way. So in my role in school psychology, people get kind of gnarly in some meetings, and it's just surprising that there is this. I discovered how adversarial a relationship can be between parents and the school system, or among staff members fighting about different things not done according to what they think should be done. And so that was a unique thing for me to try to navigate. I would kind of afterward some of these meetings like really churn about it. Some of them are still difficult. I mean, usually there's one or two meetings that I have a year that are really difficult and really challenge my capacity. It's getting better. I think I try to personalize it less, that it's going to happen. It's just going to happen. But again, I think zooming out and thinking of wherever you are, trying to put those structures in place so that you can, not to prevent burnout, but to help yourself, to help your wellness. Some of that might be thinking of the hours you work per day. You know, if you're contractually obligated to be there a certain amount of time, and of course, a lot of us are going to stay after and finish things up, do whatever we need to do. I get that if you're a salaried employee. Some of us will do that, but that is going above and beyond the job. And I think to really think about, if I put more time into this job, if I'm asked to work more than I can physically and mentally and psychologically, then it will mean that I will no longer be able to do this job, and communicating that to your employer if you're employed. Now, for those of you who are a private practice clinician, you are the ones that hold the reins on this. And that is a double-edged sword, right? So many of us leave agency work, we leave work, in a group practice or other places because we want the freedom. We don't want someone breathing down our neck telling us, you need 26 billable hours a week. That means you need to schedule 30. That was one of the expectations when I worked agency, that I scheduled 30 clients a week because people cancel, and you might end up getting 26 billable hours a week, and that was a lot. And I was able to do that in my 20s without having kids, without having, the life that I have now. But that's a lot. That's a lot to do with your admin work and just like holding all of that in your body and your soul and your mind. But for those of you in private practice, you do have the plus is that you can set these boundaries. The minus is that you're the one setting the boundary. And that was me too. I think initially I thought I had to take everybody in private practice. I did all the things, probably every private practice coach that I hear in the space now. When I went into private practice, I did exactly what they say not to do. Take any old buddy, which I get. And I see people, kind of clap back in therapist forums and say, well, we're kind of supposed to take everybody. And I think I would push back against that to say, ethically, we're supposed to stay within the bounds of our competence. So we shouldn't ethically take everybody. And I think so competency is one. So if, like for me, I didn't really treat anyone with an eating disorder. Like it wasn't an area of my expertise. So I would refer up for that, OCD, things like that. I kind of worked in the periphery with concerns like that. I was pretty specialized in working with people with brain injuries. But if there's something in the relationship that's really triggering to us, and we work through our stuff, we do our own therapy, we consult, we do, and in all of that, yes, we do that. And still, we may not be able to see a client ethically. It may be too triggering for us. And that is okay. But it's hard when we're the only ones now and we don't have regular supervision, consultation. Even if you have a couple peer groups, it is not the same as in our training when we had that feedback loop of reviewing our caseload, of talking about the work all the time. It's very different. So I think those natural guardrails that we had in the work is just not present. Even in my role in schools, when I meet with social workers in the school setting, they're always talking about their work because they work with multiple people. I love team-based work. That's probably why I still enjoy working in schools right now. So I'd have you think through both scenarios. If you're working for somebody or if you're working for yourself, what are some things that you need to stop doing? Maybe it's a time-bound thing. I need to stop working at 4. I need to stop working at 3. I need to stop working early mornings. And even if you are employed from someone, I bet you there is some flexibility in your hours, unless it's for your school, because then they're just like, that's the day, that's how it rolls. Not flexible at all. But a lot of times therapy work can be pretty flexible. So I think, especially if you are creating your own schedule, when I work with therapists, this is the biggest thing that comes up is people are doing too much and they're working in a way that doesn't work for their nervous system. So whether it be they need more breaks, so they need to space clients out, they need to maybe have a whole free day on one day of the week, whatever it is. So looking at the themes in your schedule and looking at that as a guardrail, like I'm doing this. So if that is my desire to stay in the work, that I am doing that. That is a way of self-care, and it's really hard. And especially I talk about terminations a lot. Terminations might be very ethically and clinically appropriate for your client, but because they are layered with themes of rejection, and it's so much easier, I think, for us as therapists to continue in the work and not to kind of keep our clinical edge sharp. And I, was very much guilty of this in the pandemic and in a longer term therapy relationships where there was a clinical drift that happened, and it's more therapy of the day. And yes, I think my clients were benefiting in many ways, but in other ways I could have been sharper to driving treatment goals and really reviewing those more regularly so progress can be made or discharge can happen. And so really thinking about that as a guardrail, regularly working back to treatment goals and really asking yourself this question: what are we actually doing here? Is this working? Is this helpful? If it's like a big, I don't know, then I think you really have to sit with that in the relationship. Get some consultation, get some support, figure out if those relationships are ones that need to end. So I would have you think about that. I just was quoted in a recent APA article about that, and I'll link that below. I'll probably talk about that separately on another podcast, but I'll still link it here for you guys as a resource. There are so many clinical guardrails that we can consider in the therapy work. And then segueing now to thinking about other types of guardrails. So in our personal life, what might that look like? For me, it was being done with work at a certain time. So making sure that when I logged off my computer at 4 or 5 o'clock, that I didn't come back on to do work. I can't tell you how many times it was so easy just to come back on and, work on a report if I was working a report, do a social media post, because I have been like producing a podcast and doing social media posts. It's so easy to let work bleed into life. And I think more and more, we don't need work-life balance. We need work-life separation. So consider how work-life separation can really help you in creating guardrails to feel like I really have closed my day. So having rituals of literally closing your computer down, closing your laptop, plugging in your phone, accuse your body that work is done, that we're in rest mode. For me, that's one of the guardrails has been not listening to podcasts that are educational in nature when I'm off work. So, and sometimes I get really into an audiobook and I might make an exception for that. So, like, I went on a complete Oliver Berkman tear, which I feel like I need to do a separate podcast about Oliver Berkman's work because it really touched me in a profound way. I think it gave me words to, in many ways, how I was feeling, because I'd been part of the productivity complex and the achievement complex of getting to the next star, getting to the next rung, that everything seemed purposeless after burnout, honestly, because I didn't want to do any of it. And many people tell me this after burnout. They get to a point where they're just like, what is the actual point? This is what I thought I would do my whole entire life, and I can't do it anymore. Number one, what does that mean? What do I do now? And I think his work, so one of those books is Meditations for Mortals, and the other one is 4,000 Weeks, I think. Yeah, 4,000 Weeks. So that's time management for mortals. I tend to just generally love ex-productivity authors. So like I love Cal Newport. I've talked about him on the podcast a bunch. And Oliver Burkeman, was a productivity author. And I love these former productivity authors who are like, actually, I was wrong. We don't need to be more productive. We actually need to be more human. And I think that if I would put the crux of his work into words, it would be, how do I actually be a human being now that I have tried to put myself into a bubble of productivity and X's and O's and tried to beat the system? I actually sat with a question this week in my therapy session because I'm taking a sabbatical. There's no school here in the US if you're in the US, so we break for summer. I'm breaking for summer, so that means I'm breaking from this podcast for a little bit. I have some plans to hopefully have some things loaded up for you guys to listen to over the summer or not. Like if it doesn't happen, doesn't happen, and I'm totally okay with that and coming back to it or not. So I will at least tell you something like when I figure all that out. And I think his work has also taught me that like you don't have to take life so seriously. Like this is the one life we have. Thank you, Mary Oliver, as well for giving us that poem on our one wild life. Like we have a choice, and being optimized is definitely not something that I feel like I need to do in my life anymore. So it's I think it's just embracing softness, things I've been talking about. It's giving words to a lot of the things that I'm saying. So love it. So as I'm thinking of wrapping up this conversation, I think that what the segue from that is just thinking of guardrails that we have in our life. It's not to put together a system, it's to try it out. It's to see, okay, I'm not feeling human working all day, all night. So, what are some easy things that I can do that I can put in place? Okay, let's shut our computer down at 5. Let's make a decision that I'm not looking at my email. Like, this is a power move, by the way. Power pro tip: delete the email app off your phone. Boop, take it right off. It is magical. You don't check it till morning because it's not there. You power the computer off, you delete the email app from your phone. Magical. No email. So that's one power move you can do. Other things might be trying to environmentally control your life. So that is a guardrail that I put sometimes. I need to delete it off the phone again. It just made a reminder for me because it went back on for my vacation because like I needed to access things. It needs to come off again. Powering down the computer, which it's like 5:53. So just note to self, I'm doing this. I'm doing the thing that I said I wouldn't do. Do as I say, not as I do. I'm going to power down just a minute. Powering down is a big one. So try one thing at a time. Like don't do all the above, but think about what are some small moves that I can do to help myself feel more human. That's what guardrails are. It's environmentally controlling things for yourself, because the tendency in modern life is to continue to hustle, continue to meet the need, and you will never, ever meet it. It's impossible. And once we know that, it becomes so much easier. Okay, my friends, I hope you've gotten a lot out of the guardrails episode. I just kind of thought of it. I'm trying to not use AI to help me like brainstorm anymore because I want my brain to brainstorm myself. So I've been using it sometimes, and sometimes it's helpful. I think when I just need to jot my notes into something and say like, hey, like help me produce this podcast episode. And it's never an AI. It's never AI talking. So usually it's bullet points, and then I never script fully podcasts. They are, intentionally messy and like me. Okay. Stay messy because that's what life is. I will talk with you guys soon. If you haven't already, join my Leaving the Chair newsletter. So I've revamped it, and every 2 weeks, I give you an email that's chocked with a story about missteps, usually, and some soft pivots you can make. I give some journal prompts that people tell me they really, really enjoy. Sometimes I tell you what I'm reading on my nightstand, which is a novel. It's not anything productive. I'd love you to tell me what you're reading. So if you're reading a good novel, I'm always looking for a good novel. I need to do a whole episode about that, how novels are an intervention for burnout. Because when someone told me, like, I don't know where I read it, but I guess I'm still talking here. take the psychology book off your nightstand, girl, because it's got to go. And I don't know who told me that, but ever since there's only a novel there, because I used to be like doing therapy and then reading some trauma book. And what are we doing here? No, we need to live our life. So do less, put a guardrail in, join the newsletter. We'll talk soon.